Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ghostly French Toast. And today we're talking about Death Knights and what's the deal with them. Because to be honest, I personally think they're some of the coolest enemies in the lands between, and just Elden Ring as a whole. They're just so dope looking, to be honest with you. With their skull masks and all that, and they're connected to Godwyn's a very interesting concept that kind of fixes the timeline, like kind of confusion within Elden Ring. So enough dawdling around, and what's the deal with the Death Knights? By the one and only Ghostly French Toast. So, the basics. There's two in the base game, and they're found in catacombs in the Land of Shadow. None really found in the Land Between, which is kind of silly. Serve Godwyn as his personal guard. And we got all this silly little Godwyn, this symbolism. We got the soul, basically eclipse kind of thing. And we got, of course, Godwyn, the gold, and they wouldn't be Godwyn without gold. They're kind of coated head to toe. But you also kind of got this death effect with the death cape, and you also got the death mask, which I'll discuss a little more at how I personally think that relates to Godwyn himself. Who is Godwyn? So, American Godfrey's kids, excuse me. He was besties with the dragons. So after the dragons basically invaded Lindell, right? He Godwyn's kind of like the first line of defense, and he was like just the goat. He was serving them left and right. And then he made his friends with Fortisax, and they kind of became bros, like a buddy cop duo, you know what I mean? So, overall, they're kind of chill. And Godwyn's is just a really cool guy. He's one of America's only kids that don't really have a curse like connected with him, which is kind of shocking. Because we know Moog and Morgoth, which are his brothers, have the curse of the Omen, which is kind of silly, goofy, if you ask me. As stated before, saved Lindell and basically became a war hero. And we'll discuss why I think there is some kind of reason that America kind of elevated him on this like pedestal. But for now, I'll keep it kind of secret, a little spoiler alert. Killed during the Night of Black Knight, so we know that basically Godwyn was killed by Ranni and the Black Knife Assassins to basically separate her body, basically kill off her body, but let her soul live. And then Godwyn's body basically killed his soul, but let his body live. So it's kind of like opposite, vice versa, whatever. Deathblight, alright? Effects of Godwyn's death. So, and you might be wondering, okay, that makes sense. Godwyn died and then Deathblight came into the world. Here's my personal, theory of it. We know that all of America's kids have some kind of, effect to them, where they're not really the most sane, not most sane, but there's always something wrong. They're not 100% certain, like Melania has outer god of Rob, Mikla can't age, whatever, there's something wrong. And they're always polar opposites to the Golden Order. And so I personally think Godwyn housed Deathblight until his soul separated. That's when Deathblight basically came into the world, exploded. Because it's kind of weird. So with Ranni basically doing the exact same thing to herself, no Deathblight came out of her. But with Godwyn doing it to himself, Deathblight came out from him. So I think he was housing Deathblight as kind of like his own curse that he didn't really know but knew, which I'll discuss also later on the next slide. So just hold your horses, Hasselhoff. So anyways, Godwyn's death basically brought Deathblight into the world. But I do think that Godwyn housed Deathblight beforehand, if that makes any sense. Soul died, but his body didn't. And I kind of been hammering that point where, unlike Ranni and all that, his soul basically was separated from his body and killed off. But his body's basically still alive and still functioning and all that silly, goofy stuff. And we see similar effects to, Rajier. Rajier's body's basically kind of not the best right now. But we know that he's basically in control of Fia. Oh, excuse me, sorry. He's in control of Fia, and that's the big problem right now, where he's fighting for Fia. His body's basically dead, but his soul, because he's infected by Deathblight after going down below Stormvale. Kills most things in the land between. So even as stating before, Rajier, most things will die. And America had a lot of fear towards Deathblight, even though PvE wise it's not going to really do anything. But lore wise, Deathblight is one of the things that she feared the most, because we see at the bottom near the base of the Erd Tree, we see how basic Lindell is hiding Godwyn's corpse, and it's tucked away so most people wouldn't find it. It's like a little trunk. It's at the base where most people aren't really allowed down there. It's sacred ground anyways. So I do think America was trying to hide it. And going back to where I was saying that Godwyn was basically escalated to this war hero status, I feel like this was also to try to take away like the effect of Deathblight, where it's like, oh, let's, oh, he kind of disappeared out of nowhere, but let's elevate into a war hero status. And like, don't get me wrong, he's a war hero, but I think there was some kind of bias behind that where America was like, kind of gotta hide this, stuff it into the closet, you know. And like, I'll discuss this also later. Spoiler alert, where I do think rot is like the new status quo, if that makes any sense. And instead of being opposite of the Golden Order, it's like what would happen if the Golden Order keeps on going, you know? Oh, there. Death Knights. And why are they in the lands between? Because they're land of shadow. Like, the fuck are they doing over there? Death Knights are hunting down Godwyn. So, going back to earlier where I was talking about how it kind of clarifies timeline issue. So we know Marika separated the lands of shadow from the lands between after Mesmer led his crusade. But we also see Godwyn's corpse in the catacombs of the Land of Shadows. So that would lead you to believe where it's like, oh, Godwyn was basically killed before the separation, and he spread into there. I personally don't think that's the case. Main reason being, so with Mesmer wasn't really talked about in the lanes between. There's not really any reference to him. So I personally think this happened before Godwyn's death, because we know that everyone was kind of still chill with Mesmer even before the Crusade, where he was friends with Radahn, whatever. So I think that was if Godwyn died after the separation, how would he get into Land of Shadows, Mesmer, and why wouldn't Mesmer be like chill and talking about it, like, you know? Or like even send his Fire Knights, because those guys are like avid researchers of like scholars of everything. So I personally think that the separation of the lands between and the Land of Shadow happened um, before Godwyn's death. And it's kind of interesting to think where Godwyn's like body's spreading so far, even in a land that's basically veiled from the world that's just death. Of course you're gonna have Deathblight there, but like it's spreading. And this is what I'll get into, like the new status quo that I was talking about earlier, but let's finish talking about this, where it was some kind of crusade. They're leading to find Godwyn's corpse and just trying to like give him kind of rest, if that makes sense. They probably didn't know what Deathblight really was. Like, yes, they have all these death effects, and I do think this was given by Godwyn. Given these awesome, cool cape, and I wish we had that cape, it would be so dope. All these powers by Godwyn. And I think that's like, oh, Godwyn kind of understood his curse, but didn't fully, if that makes sense. Didn't know the ramifications of the separation. So I didn't think Godwyn had some control of like death and power. So to bestow this, because this is kind of weird. Like, how would they get this ability, you know? And they have Godwyn's lightning and all that. Still uses death abilities like as Death Cape, the Death Grab. The Death Grab's always dope. You can't go wrong with the Death Grab, you know. The future of Deathblight, new status quo. So similar to Scarlet Rot. I feel like Scarlet Rot is like the opposite of the Golden Order, where it's always gonna be changing and all that. It's rotting. It's basically becoming anew. Where Deathblight is kind of just stagnant. It's not really gonna do much. It's gonna say the same. We see that with like Godwyn, where the body still lives on, but the soul dies. Like with America's rule of death, everyone didn't die anymore, so everyone just kept like, you know, living. And I feel like it's kind of symbolic where, hey, America, like, if everyone keeps living, this is kind of like representing where it's going to go up in flames, where Deathblight, where God was basically given, quote-unquote, eternal, basically, life, but at the cost of his soul, where it's just his body living on, if that makes any sense. Similar to the Rot, but as stated before, it doesn't really make new stuff, stays the same, and as it's everything wrong with the Golden Order. So it's still it's very similar to how the Radagon runs the Golden Order, where it's like, he's trying to stay the same, whatever, trying to keep the Golden Order alive. But like, Godwyn's giving like this this effect where it's like, no, bro, check yourself before you wreck yourself. But yeah, that's it for this time. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on Ghostly French Toast. Bye bye.